Hi, I'm Shaka Hislop.
Hi, I'm Kellie Maloney.
This is another of our podcasts celebrating 25 years of show races on the red card.
This is 25 for 25, a Show Racism the Red Card podcast. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
I remember you as Frank Maloney, this larger than life character, boxer, come boxing promoter, come politician, come heart attack survivor. And then you made the very brave decision 7 years ago to transition. How was that journey for you, both
It,
in the short and the longer term, in declaring yourself as transgender?
in the long term, it's been very good for me. My health is better, touch wood. I'm a much better
Mm.
person. In the short term, it was terrifying because I feared of losing I walked away from the sport at the top. I still believe that I could have continued, but I didn't know how I'd be received. And that's what scared me most. I feared losing my friends and my family, and I feared losing the respect that I had. And in a certain way, I have lost a bit of respect from people who don't seem to understand what I've been through. But overall, I think it's taught me a lot because, as Frank, as you said, I was larger than life character. I made comments I shouldn't have made. I made suggestions I shouldn't have made. And I done things that you do because you're hiding something. Living a lie is a terrible thing. When you're living a lie, you're carrying a burden on your shoulders, and you're not only living a lie to yourself. You're living a lie to the people in your life. You're living a lie to the colleagues at work, and it does affect your judgment and decisions. And I know some of the things did affect my judgment and decisions, but it was all part of, I suppose, coming to terms with myself, because
Mm-hmm.
until I could come to terms with myself and accept myself, I couldn't expect anyone else to accept me. And I think that was the hardest thing, because even at the last minute, I didn't know if I was doing the right thing. I was so, but in the end, it became a matter of life and death. And I wanted to stay alive, and I wanted to see
Mm.
my children grow up, and I wanted to see my grandchildren. I even at the end thought, if I lose my family, I would hope they would come back eventually when they saw that how contented I was, how happy I was, and how I was able to share in their lives. Because I actually stopped sharing in my children's lives as they were growing up, and that's a terrible thing to say.
Any regret?
No regrets at all. As I said, I'm a different person. I'm a much more contented person. If anything, it was a lesson. I mean, it's quite unique to live in two genders and see the world from both sides. Because
Mm.
I was in a sort of side of I had a group of friends that were, I will say, they were great guys, but they were like, they'd all made their money in certain professions, certain careers. They, if I put it right, not all of them had respect for society the way you should have, and that's the
Mm.
one thing I did learn. It's about respect more than anything else. It doesn't matter about a person's color. It doesn't matter about a person's nationality, their religion, their gender, their sexuality, because at the end of the day, they're human beings. We're all a member of that same race. We're all human beings, and I think about racism, about everything else. You may not you may not like the guy that lives next door to you. He could be he could be Irish, he could be Welsh, he could be any
Mm.
nationality. But as long as you respect him as a human being, that's the most important thing. There are people I don't like, but I respect them.
Mm.
That's important.
Well, one of the cliches I've used in whenever I've spoken over the last year or so, certainly during the rise of this Black Lives Matter movement, is that a rising tide lifts all boats. And right now, that rising tide is Black Lives Matter, but the all boats are that call for equality of our women, of our LGBTQ community, of our asylum seekers, our immigrants, our frontline workers. And that's why I thought it was important and good that we speak to you, somebody from that LGBTQ community who shares in so many of the struggles. You've lived those firsthand. You've spoken about your fear of coming out, of how difficult it was to admit things to yourself. How troubled you may have found it yourself. How has your family responded? You spoke about some of your friends and losing some of those. Understandable. You have to lose some of that baggage when you own your truth. But family clearly is important to you. How has your family accepted this journey, your journey?
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I mean, I've got 3 daughters, and it was a struggle for them, but they came on board. They worked, they helped me, and they've been my rock. You know, I remember when I told one of my daughters, and she looked at me and she said, "Dad, I'm so glad we know the truth. We were so afraid that you had an illness, that you were dying. We'd rather have our dad in a dress than in a wooden box," you know, and that was amazing when my daughter said that, you know, and I think it's also enlightened my daughters to be much more acceptance in the world. Though they're from a younger generation, so they're a little bit different. They're much more tolerant than my generation was, and much more acceptance. You know, I mean, they changed the world their own way, you young people of today. And it would be great to see, you know, Black Lives Matters, the LGBT community, the other diversity communities like disabled, all getting together and fighting on the same page, because, you know, in numbers we're greater than we are trying to fight individually or in separate groups. I'm a great believer. It's all about, if everyone comes together, you will change society, and we will change view. Maybe not in your lifetime, Shaka, or my lifetime, but we will see the change. Our children will see that, because our children are the ones that are going to carry on the work that we are trying to put into place now.
Absolutely. One of the most powerful things that I had said to me over the last year was by one of our Vice Presidents, Leroy Rossignol, and he said, "See this as a journey. We're running a leg and trying to hand the baton off to our kids, to the next generation, to hopefully deliver on the promise of this moment." That for me, I found so empowering. Let me ask this, Kellie. You talk about dealing with the sports world, and in a game as in a sport as male dominant as boxing was, and in many regards continues to be, understanding how difficult that was for you, and looking at some of the parallels with football today. The football community do not have those examples of players coming out as members of the LGBTQ community. We have Justin Fashanu, very sad tale from so many years ago. We have Robbie Rogers, who played in England for a while, US international, who came out as gay when he came back to Major League Soccer. What would your advice be to young men or women struggling with their identity in this sport, and given some of the stereotypes and a lot of the hate that you see within our game?
Yeah, I think it's very hard. The women's game is not so bad. You know, the women are much more free about coming out. Maybe it's because they don't have that male dominant crowds there, you know. And at the moment, some people still don't take women football serious, but it is beginning to grow and grow. But I work with a woman that's done a program called Driving Force. It's all about women in sport. And when you see how they've been treated and the struggle they've had, you know, you can understand why it might be hard for guys to come out. But I think it's the fear of the crowd. You know, I mean, you know, what a lot of black players go through is unbelievable. There's still the monkey chants. There's still the N-word shouted at games, which, you know, and And I think clubs are working hard, especially my club, Millwall, that had a bad reputation. But we've always had great black players. I mean, I can go back to years. We had John Fashanu there, and we had a player before that, George, I can't think of his surname. And I'm going back to the 70s, and he was loved by the Millwall crowd. He was totally loved by the Millwall crowd. But it's the opposing team that would get the abuse. That's what we've got to stop. We've got to stop that. And what the clubs are doing by banning people if they catch them is a lifetime ban. And it's got to be their friends and that crowd of people together, because it's still there, but it is a minority. I do think football is changing. I do think the fans are beginning to change. But if a player came out, would they divert all the anger and hatred towards a gay footballer? As long as he could score goals, I wouldn't care.
you say that, Kelly, and that brings me to another point. Recently, we had Tony Bellew and Tony Jeffries on our podcast talking about boxing, and their point was, as long as you can box, nothing else matters. Doesn't matter your color, your ethnicity, your sexual identity. Is that how you found it in your sport, boxing?
I was like that. I must be honest, boxing, I don't think boxing, you don't find a racist element in boxing. There may be the odd one, but it's not, you don't get fans booing a black fighter the way you get. I mean, the time we had it, the only time I really recalled it was an Alan Minter for Marvin Hagler at Wembley way back in the 70s, I think it might be. But again, that was quite, that was wrong. And I think we had a little bit when Errol Christie for the West Ham fighter, a big West Ham football fan, Mark Caylor. We had a little bit then, but nowhere near to what you get in football. Boxing is, I've had the privilege of working with some of the greatest black athlete boxers of all times, Lennox Lewis. And when you go in the gym, you don't see their colour. You don't think of their nationality. You look at them as a person, and the person you're working with, and you're a team, and you work together. And to me, that's so important, And Tony Jeffries and Tony Bell, you're right. We don't see colour in boxing. We see the fighter in front of us.
And have things begun to change with more women involved in the sport? How has that affected the overall kind of view within the game? Because you're seeing, Kelly, that boxing can be seen as such an example to different sports, but still, and excuse me, I'm looking at it from the outside here. It seems to be such a testosterone-driven sport. Yet you have women coming in now, fighting successfully, making careers for themselves. How has that affected the sport, both internally within people within the game, and to a broader boxing fan base?
There are still some people in the boxing fans who don't like women boxing. I mean, if I go back to my previous life, I didn't agree with women boxing, but mine was a purely commercial decision, because I was approached by women boxers, and I went to my TV company and they said, we do not want the women on. And we are driven by TV companies because they pay the bucks. Without them, we can't survive. But now they seem to like women's sport. But, I listened to a woman boxer not long ago who done a really great interview. And she said, I hope we're not just being used because we are actually cheaper than men boxers at the moment because of the pandemic and no crowd. So it's cheaper to put women on, because that's where the surge has been. Why the women boxers? Why there's been no crowds? So we are, and they are paid less than men as well, and so are women, which is sad. But I'm hoping that it will continue to grow, because it's the choice of the individual. It's something I heard when I didn't want to do women's boxing, and I spoke out against it. At the end of the day, if you're letting men choose to box and women want to box, let them box.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Kelly. A lot of talk and debate has gone into transgender athletes involved in sport and how we manage that. I'm as much as you have a lot of politicians fighting against it, as a member of the LGBTQ community, as a transgender person yourself, what's the right approach? If you're advising a politician, what's the right approach to young people involved in sport?
My approach is, it can't be, depending on where they are. I believe sports should be a level playing field. I'm a great believer, but you're always going to get elite sports. But if you look at the sports, you've got these certain women coming out saying that transgender women should. How many transgender women have won an Olympic gold medal? None. How many have held a world title? None. World records? None. How many have beaten athletes? Hardly any. It depends. Let's just look at if they just start their transition and they're still full of testosterone, then I don't believe they should be able to take part. But if they've transitioned, they've been living in their gender that they believe is their rightful gender, their testosterone levels right, and they've been on the female hormones, then I believe they should. Certain sports today anyway, horse racing, other sports, there is no discrimination against women and men anyway. But there are certain sports that you may not be able to do it, and I accept that. Maybe boxing may be one. I don't know, but to me, there's not been enough medical evidence. They're taking the average woman and the average man. You've got to take some transgender women and who have transitioned and been living in their gender for a couple of years, do medical tests on them to see exactly how they are, and then make the decision. It's a hard decision. I don't think anyone should be denied sports. Disability people, any religion shouldn't stop you from sport. Your nationality, your colour shouldn't stop you from sport. Your gender, your sexuality shouldn't. But it should be a level play. That's what I believe.
I totally understand. And just personally, my own opinion is we've become so focused on winning, even at youth level, that we kind of forget why, as kids, we get involved in sport in the first place. And that's a sad state of our own affairs as parents of young aspiring athletes. But Kellie, I want to go ahead.
I do think sport has to be competitive. I'm not a great believer. You shouldn't have a winner. You shouldn't have a loser. You must have because sport prepares you for the real life as well. Real life is not a bed of roses. So if you go into sport and your teacher, oh right, we're gonna have a race there, but there's gonna be no winners. We're gonna have a game of football, but there's no winner. That's not real life. There are winners and losers in real life, and I believe sport prepares us for that. The boxing world prepared me for what I've been through, and that without the world, I may not be the person I am today.
You've used the phrase in your previous life a few times during our conversation today. Is that how you see things, as having lived in effect two lives?
Yeah, I read quite a lot, and I'm a great believer in the natives of America, actually, the Red Indians. We believe in a person with two spirits is a person that's lived in both genders, are wise and are very special, because you've lived in one gender, you know that gender was wrong, you've moved into the gender that's correct, but you understand both genders, and that is quite unique. I do refer to my previous life, because I can run from my previous life, but I can't hide from it. So it's always going to be there. So certain things I've done in my previous life will always come back and haunt me. And certain things I've done will always come back. I will always be known as the first English boxing manager to bring an English heavyweight champion back to England in 100 years. You know, that is my legacy. So I can't, you know, and as I say, I've made mistakes in that. I can't run from that life, and I don't want to, because that is who I am. That made the person that's sitting here, you, Shaka. So, but I just refer to it as my previous life because I was in a different gender.
That speaks to so much, again, of my own story and involvement. Show recently Red Card, that duality of who we are, and to my story and being involved and launching Show Recently Red Card, it was being racially abused and recognizing as a young man coming from Trinidad and Tobago how so many in the world saw me. In the one instance, I'm a footballer worthy of praise, and on another, I'm worthy of no more than the most vile racist abuse. So I understand fully exactly that duality that you continue to live with. That, as you say, you run from, but you know you cannot hide from. Kellie, I'd like to just take a moment just to say thank you very much for your time here today. It's been educating and inspiring in so many ways, in understanding our shared plights, our shared equality and humanity, and in owning your truth and speaking up for those like us who continue to have our voices dulled as best they can. It really has been a wonderful few moments sharing this time with you, recognizing the example that you have been to so many in your community, and you are to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. And we're all fighting the same cause. We just want equality and fairness for everyone in the world. And in
absolutely, absolutely we do. And as a West Ham fan, I'm not sure I'm supposed to be praising a Millwall fan so much.
West Ham goal.
But Kellie, thank you so much for your time, for your example, for living your truth and showing us all that there's true power in it.
Thank you. Thanks.